exercised their authority from St Stephen's Chapel, or the great chapter house of the Abbey. However, Crown, Lords and Commons, not to forget the masters of the city who sheltered in the Guildhall, were fearful of a new danger. A great scourge was now raising its head as peace and harmony allegedly returned. The great gangs of London, the Rifflers and the Roaring Boys, were also making their presence felt. These legions of the damned, as the chronicler described them, were not supposed to exist. People could reject them and their wicked doings as the work of those who gossip and chatter, claim that the danger they posed was all shadow and no substance. Nevertheless, the gangs were there, like the great rats which plagued the sewers. They did not like to be caught out in the open, but their brutal acts were clear enough for all to see. The chronicler emphasized this important fact, and his own abbot expressed this riddle, a paradox for all the good brothers to ponder on: how the great London gangs did exist, but they only moved or acted by courtesy and favour of the lords, Gaunt, Arundel, and the rest, who could whistle up their packs of wild dogs whenever they wished. Of all the gangs and covens of Rifflers, none was more feared than the Sycamores, under their leader Simon Makepeace, also known as the Flesher, a brutal soul, tavern-master, mine host, and owner of the Devil's Oak, close to the Thames, in Queenhithe ward. The tavern squatted like a great fat bloated toad with dirty leprous warts at the heart of a maze of alleys and runnels which reeked to high heaven of dirt and filth. The tenements lining these needle-thin paths were propped up by makeshift struts and rotten beams, their windows sealed with iron-bound shutters. Nevertheless, people lived here, the midnight folk, crammed as fast and as thick as lice on a slab of putrid beef. The denizens of these hellish dwellings clustered around makeshift braziers full of smoking, dusty charcoal. The stench of singeing clothes and unwashed flesh curled everywhere. The braziers provided a little light, some warmth, as well as being a source of putrid food. The tenements were places of perpetual twilight, where figures crawled, dark, crouching shapes, against the poor light. So it looked as if Judgment Day had dawned, and every obscure grave was giving up its dead. Once night fell, men, women, and children slunk out to hunt for whatever they could, along with the great grey rats, though even these rodents sensed that the staircases and stairwells in these mouldering mansions were most dangerous, teetering on the verge of collapse. Instead, both dwellers and vermin used the Jacob's ladders, rickety staircases built on the outside of the tenements. Hell's Buttery, as this part of Queenhithe, adjoining the Thames, was so aptly known, was a shadowy, dismal place full of steaming filth. Everything loathsome and decaying could be found here, dens of depravity, where murder had taken up residence under smoke-stained ceilings. Thieves and prostitutes, pimps and cunning men crawled amongst the cockroaches, which scampered in vast hordes across the rotting floors, where dirt swilled ankle-deep. Along the narrow runnels stood decaying alehouses, their taprooms nothing more than amphitheatres, where a wooden circular fence about 5 feet high ringed a sand-filled arena. Here the huge grey rats from the nearby wharves were pitted against ferocious terriers, and when the rats had been specially starved, against each other. All of London's grotesques gathered to watch, the likes of Daniel the Damned, with his huge dead eyes in a coarse bloated face, who offered to bite off the head of a rat for a penny, and that of a mouse for a farthing. Daniel had clashed with some of the Flesher's followers and had promptly disappeared, never to be seen again. Killings were commonplace. Murder in all its gruesome forms, a daily occurrence. Just before the Great Revolt, one of the rotting tenements in Hell's Buttery had abruptly collapsed. Officials of the ward